I'm just recording. Technology, two at the same time. Very good, very good. Yeah. So both Florrie and Amanda saying reliant on technology, experimenting with technology. Yeah, that could well dominate, couldn't it? It could well dominate because things are going to evolve, aren't they, on the technology front with AI in lots of different directions. So there will be a lot of technological exploration. That's very true. I'm thinking what might also happen, though, is when that happens, the technology, there will be like a great charm for some things that are handmade. So there'll be a response from the handmade area where these beautiful one-off handmade things by the human hand. Yeah, Amanda's saying, I hope so. I think that's what might happen. Your oil paintings or your made sculptures, or will become very precious, maybe, and very sought after. Okay, any other technology? Definitely, that was going to be one of the ones I mentioned. Any others that people feel are any areas which will develop or become important in creative practice? No, obviously. Okay, well, for me, the environment. Yeah, the environment. Okay, so this is going to be more of a concern. Dealing with the climate crisis, dealing with environmental situation is going to become uppermost in a lot of people's minds, more so. It will have to be so. But that is going to feature a lot more, and we saw it in Olafur Eliasson's work, of course, and that will become a thing. And Amanda said political commentary. Yes, that's my third one. It's more political. So we think of Amy Sherrill's work, of Brianna, that portrait, work around, especially post-colonial stuff. So, the horrors that were inflicted upon Africa, India, whatever, in post-colonial times. These are all being represented now, and there'll be loads of other issues. Black Lives Matter, gender politics, all these things will become much more part of creative practice. Yeah. But then again, I think that there will be a sort of an opposite, where the beautiful thing, the beautiful thing that people make. Just trying to think of those, like the Jeff Koons, those things will also become, because they're the opposite of that. Okay, and that's what's exciting, isn't it, about the creative dynamic that ebbs and flows. Good. Okay, so we've got a new little section here at the end now I'm going to do about ideas generation, because I think that's useful for all creatives, just to think that through a little bit. A little bit about academic referencing, which is a bit kind of like dry and a bit highbrow, but I thought it's good to, if you haven't come across it before, it'd be good just to introduce this idea to you, because obviously a lot of you will be going forward into an academic a more academic courses and a journey, an academic journey. So referencing is quite important. So we'll just have to do a little bit on that. It's nothing big. First, I want to say, though, do you want to how about ideas? How do we get our ideas? Before I have a look at some of this stuff, have any of you got any? How do you get your ideas? Where, when, how? Put it in the chat if you've got any particular ways that you find your ideas. Very, very good. So talk with my art friend. I mean, that's got to be up there, hasn't it? One of the top ones. Talk with other creative people, talk with friends about ideas. and see what comes back. The toing and froing. Yeah, completely. That is a quite a common one and a well-used one. Anyone else got any? I mean, kind of thinking is the obvious one. Sounds obvious, but don't put thinking in there because I think that's kind of the obvious one, isn't it? Yeah, Beatrix put a load of good stuff in there. Conversations, yeah, like what Mai's saying. People watching, yeah. A lot of it depends on what media, isn't it? What you're, if you're an illustrator or whatever, and you're illustrating the world, then watching people is great, isn't it? Listening. Disagreements and opposition, gosh, that's an interesting one. Problems, yeah. Problem solving, is where ideas, you have to put ideas to problem solving, don't you? So maybe that's what you mean, or just from issues. Yeah, I think that's problems with one's life, challenges, stuff comes out of that. And that I'm I'm Amanda with you on that. I do that. Stumble upon ideas when trying out new techniques. So you're kind of trying things out and oh, blimey, that's quite interesting. What happened there? So that is definitely a way too. Yeah, good stuff, everyone. So I've got a whole list here, which is a bit boring, but I'll just show you the list. Quite a few of these are on it. I was hoping it would come up as bullet points, but it hasn't. Oh well. Anyway, we'll just quickly go through these, but I think, inspiration from your own life. So we've kind of touched upon that. Being in nature is a big one. A lot of artists, creative people say, oh, go into nature, go into the woods, go for a long walk, go to the beach, go along and just switch off. And, that's a good one. Looking at other art and research, which is kind of what we're doing in these lectures, isn't it? So that I always get ideas from other people's work. Oh, sorry, they are in bullet points. Yeah, but I was hoping they would come up as, an animation. But yeah, using social media sparingly. I mean, I use Instagram a lot now just to put in a search term and see what comes up. It's like a really quick sort of, quick sort of scan, isn't it, of stuff. You can get lots and lots of stuff really quickly. So I think that's quite good. Daily work routines, yeah. Writing in a journal. So a lot of people put their thoughts down, writing every day, and that's works for some people. Reading. I think movies is great. So many things go on in movies. It's packed with stuff. All the way through, different things going on aesthetically and ideas. So I think they're really rich areas. Just so is listening. Some people just listen to music they love, just switching off, listening to classical music, or maybe you get ideas from different forms of music. But jazz, so many artists have jazz on in their studio. It's where they get idea for some reason. It just kind of clicks. So yeah. Drawing every day. So that idea of having a sort of a timetabled practice, I suppose. Writers do it. Write 3 pages in the morning. Draw 3 pages every morning. Doesn't matter what it is, just do it. And that they swear by that. Stopping, meditating. That is one which is quite common. So rather don't do anything, nothing. It's probably exercising. This is all about relaxing, I think, isn't it? Switching off. Reflecting on your own work. Hopefully we do that. We've had that one. Talking, bouncing ideas off of others. Playing with materials. Again, Amanda came up with that one just now. Trying out materials, playing with them. Primary research. Okay, so that's things like surveys, questionnaires. We talked about that in an earlier lecture. So interviewing people, doing surveys, finding out original stuff can lead to new ideas. And then I put the bottom, thinking, exclamation mark, which kind of goes on with most of those, but it is a bit of a myth to think artists stop and think, right, I'm going to think of a good idea. That's a little bit of a myth. I mean, it works. Look, this is all in every individual is different, thankfully, but thinking is not always the way to get ideas, funnily enough. Sometimes it's better not to think. Okay, so there's a whole great list there. I mean, I think what I do think is worth trying new things. I think even if you've got your ideas come through certain channels, I do think it's worth just, you know, trying new things. People say like even the word trying is pretty rubbish, because once you try and do stuff, it's like maybe not allowing that thing to filter in really. Anyway, so, you know, the thing is mind mapping is a common one, isn't it? And a really good one. So we all know about mind maps, diagram to visually organize information. Hierarchical, yeah, shows relationship among pieces of the whole. Normally starts off with a big word and then goes to smaller ones, often around a simple concept, the center of a blank page. Words are added. Words, this is a very beautiful one, isn't it? Sometimes they can be lovely things in themselves. If you're this kind of artist, then you can actually make it into something very beautiful, work of art in itself. Very, very nice. So yeah, we all know about mind maps. I think the important thing with mind maps is not to censor any thoughts. I mean, I'm terrible at this. I think, oh, I'm not going to put that down because it's not a very nice word, or you know, that's silly. You know, I think you can't. None of this is censorable. However ridiculous they seem, just write it down. I mean, this is a more likely mind map, I think, isn't it, than that beautiful thing before. It says temptation from creative students to make them aesthetically pleasing, which can hinder new direction because you're more interested in how it looks. So this is for me a more sort of like usual or sort of practical type mind map. There's clearly very little censoring going on here. Yeah, trying to get it all down. And this comes from crime cases, you know, trying to solve a problem. Okay, and that's what we're talking about. How do we solve the problem of getting ideas? How do I solve the problem of this? Yeah, creative work. Okay. So in crime cases, you see it, don't you? Detectives stick all the stuff up on a wall, pin up relevant information. It's an evolving process. So you keep adding things. I think artists sort of sometimes have this in their studio where they have pin up loads of stuff and add, you know, swatches or drawings or text and add them and piece together the sort of working creative boredom. But it's not common for artists to do this sort of thing, I don't think. But we can see where the mind map idea comes from. This is divergent thinking, where all the things are, you know, diverging out from a central point. In this case, it would be the murder, wouldn't it? And then you've got the central point, then you've got all the weird things going on around it. Divergent then becomes convergent. So in this case here, we can see this figure here, bottom right, converged onto them because maybe they're now the prime suspect or whatever. So we go from the big divergent area to the narrower convergent thinking. But then people talk about lateral thinking, which I think that is what creative people do a lot in stumbling upon new ideas. And Edward de Bono was the character who developed this theory, or people say thinking outside of the box. It was built on the observation that we often lean towards straightforward, obvious solutions to problems, instead encourage us to seek out more oblique, innovative answers. And I find that myself, I think, sometimes when I've got a new piece of work I'm going to do, oh, yeah, that's great, that'll work. And it's quite often at that point where you think, actually, that's quite an obvious solution and a quick one, which is, I've got to it, great, I've solved it. But then actually, then it's time to then stop and think, actually, can this be pushed a bit further? Can there be more innovative solution to that rather than this obvious one, which I just stumbled across, which I'm comfortable with, you know? So I think that's a good observation. And he proposed 4 techniques for lateral thinking. Awareness, and this is quite interesting, I think. Try to cultivate an awareness of how our particular mind processes information. I think that is really interesting. And I've put learning styles in brackets because I think this does relate to our learning styles. Sorry, I've forgotten who. Amanda, again, sorry to keep coming to that, but Amanda said she stumbles upon when trying out new techniques. So maybe Amanda learns well from testing practically, trying practical learning. Okay, some people just learn very well from reading. So maybe that's reading is where you get your ideas. Yeah. Some people learn very well from listening to the lectures or listening to presentations. So you learn from that. Maybe that's where you get your ideas. So I think that an awareness of of yourself and how you learn and how you work is a good starting point. And then it talks about random stimulation, going for a walk, listen to a podcast, conversation. These are all the things we kind of listed. Some sort of random thing to stimulate. Yeah. And then the alternative thing. So even if we come across an option, which is kind of like a solution, that's the time then to say, oh, what are the alternatives? Okay, rather than I'm going with that. Yeah. And this is an interesting idea. The fourth technique, alteration, reverse the relationship, go in the opposite direction. So, and this does work quite well, I know, for some people. So we're saying, okay, here's the solution. What's the opposite? Is there an opposite to that? What would that be? What would be the extreme opposite to that? And actually, that can just take you to a very, very different sort of place. Yeah. So interesting stuff. And then here's a few techniques to overcome creative blocks. Set limitations. So I talked about that, didn't I, just now, that idea of doing a journal every morning or doing 3 pages of drawing every morning. It's a constraint. So it forces creativity. Again, that idea of forcing or, timetables seems very uncreative, but actually some creative people, they love structure. They love working to a structure. They love limitations because there's far too much going on for them to bring it all together. Random input technique. Random stimuli to break from conventional thinking. Yeah, I don't know how you do that, but that sounds quite a good idea, doesn't it? I think that's probably could be May's idea of talking with a friend, because you're going to get something a bit more random coming in then from your friends, aren't you, or your peers? So that would work quite well. Role playing. Whoa, that's an interesting one. Put yourself in the mind of a character, a brand, or a different audience. I think we're talking there about more design-based problems rather than sort of more art-based problems. So if you've got a design-based problem, put yourself, role play the audience or role play the user. Get yourself in their position, empathize with them, and then you can see the problem from a different place. Exquisite Corpse. That's quite an interesting one. It's a bit out there, but one of those many Beatrix just put up. Exquisite Corpse is a great icebreaker for group workshops. Love using it. Yeah, it is. So it's a surrealist technique. Drawing or narratives passed around with each person adding their part without seeing the whole. So here's one, really nice one. So basically 4 people will draw a head and fold the paper, pass it around, and 4 people draw a body, fold it over, and then 4 people pass it around and 4 people draw the feet. And then you open it up at the end and you can see some strange juxtapositions of things in the images. Again, I think, these are certain practices have good. This is great for illustrators, I think. Really good for illustrators and animators, really good. Because you've got new ways of working with a figure, new ways. There's a time-based element. It's probably for photographers. It's probably not the best method, is it? I mean, you could say it's thinking outside the box and doing something completely ridiculously opposite to photography. You could say it's okay, but there's an obvious idea here that maybe it's good for people who are drawing the figure quite a lot. But Beatrix is saying is an icebreaker, so presumably that's probably for groups that aren't maybe creative groups. So if you're just meeting up with a bunch of new people for the first time and do Exquisite Corpse, that's rather quite good fun, isn't it? And there's no sort of pretense that they're going to be great drawings or whatever. Text, yeah, Beatrix saying text. So text, you make up the stories, don't you? And then you each add a third or a line, fold it over, add a line, keep adding it on. So it is a really great icebreaker. Okay, and then there's the design thinking framework, which if you're involved in design, you probably would have come up with this, some sort of design thinking framework. The most common one is this 4-stage thinking. And you've got, the first one is empathize. So understand the needs of the end user. So if you're thinking about making a chair, who's the chair for? You've got to get into the soul of the person the chair's for, get into their mind, what they want. Clearly articulate the problem, design a chair for these people. And then ideate, which is a word I absolutely hate, but generate ideas and solutions through creative processes. And then prototype it and test it. So build on the ideas through experimentation, test it out with people, evaluate. So that's a classic design thinking framework. So a framework which your ideas fit within. Again, designers quite like that. Although they do need to think out the box, there's no doubt about it. They can't, for a fine artist, thinking outside the box is absolutely fine. No one's going to be worried whatever the hell you do. With design, it's a bit more tricky because you've got an audience to think about, an end user. So there are limitations, yeah, and you need to get yourself in the mind of that. So that's quite, slightly different, I'd say, for different creative practices. And this is just to finish on this one, really, this is the important thing. Don't be afraid to fail, in inverted commas, okay? Failure is a crucial part of the creative process. I'm going back to Amanda's thing again. Sorry, Amanda. Stumble upon ideas, trying out new techniques. So, I do it a lot, trying out new techniques, mixing different media, playing with stuff. And something might come out, which, wow, couldn't have thought that one. Just what have I discovered, So failure is a crucial part of the creative process. View unsuccessful attempts as part of the idea creation process. So it's part of the longer term process of ideas creation. Yeah, creative practice. Here's a pot here, which is actually quite beautiful, isn't it? As a sculpture, but it's obviously failed as a pot. You're not going to be able to put anything in it. But actually, can we look at it and think, actually, it's quite a really nice piece of work, isn't it, sculpturally? Can we sort of look at connections there and think, actually, maybe I'll use that in my next pot, that idea there, I don't know. And this really scribbly drawing here, just sort of thrown down. Again, it's not a failure, it's just part of the process. A failure implies that, I think failure implies you've got something very, very specific in mind. And that can be the case, of course. So, but often it's not. So you need to go with it. Like if there's a certain model being made precisely to, an architectural model that's being made precisely to dimensions out of a certain thing, and it has to look like that and be like that. If that doesn't work, then it's kind of a failure, isn't it? But you can still, more of a failure than a painting that or whatever doesn't come out, but you can still learn from it and still take bits out of it. Yeah, so you're obviously told this all the time by art tutors. Don't be afraid to fail, but it's true. You've got to let go of that. There's no such thing as perfection. There's no such thing as successful failure. You've got to try and let go of that. It's really hard because that's what we're brought up to, like, succeed and make things perfect and all that. And it's not. Creative processes are it's different. Yeah. Okay, just a little bit on the referencing then. Just to finish off for 5 minutes. So, where are we? Yeah, so you will, I think it's just good to get this sort of thing in your head. You might not have to use it, or I think you might be actually on the course. I'm not sure. I need to check this with Matt, but I think there is a. Has anybody been? Yeah, actually, has any of you come across this as a requirement for the course? It might not be policed, or, but have any of you come across this idea of referencing things when you're writing stuff? We're talking about writing, really, rather than. I'm not sure. Probably wouldn't be for sketchbook work, but I'm just wondering if anyone been. Yes. Oh, right. Well done, Samaya. So you come across it as part of the course, or as part of the introduction to the course, or no? Okay, yeah, right. So you come across it in a previous life, yeah, in general. Okay, great. So, I mean, I'm working with the third-year degree students at the moment at the Arts University Bournemouth, and they have to reference, they have to reference using the Harvard system as a reference list and bibliography. Otherwise, they fail the paper. Okay, so it's a completely rigid part of it. Yeah, Amanda's saying not in the first section. I believe it comes up later on. I think it's for final project. I think you have to do a Harvard referencing bibliography or reference list or whatever. It is the standard system in English universities for referencing for dissertations and essays as you go through the year. So if you're going to progress on to degree courses, you will need to kind of get to grips with it. Okay, just a few slides on it, nothing much. So yeah, when researching, it's important to recognize and acknowledge any sources, okay? Essential when writing academic essay reports and important aspect of your studies at higher education level. They're usually put together in, we call it a bibliography or sometimes a reference list. There's a slight difference between them. Let's not get hung up on that. It's just terminology. And it's worth saying that a good bibliography will show a range of sources. So, whenever we get an essay and it's all websites, it's like, oh no, you got the feeling that the research hasn't been that thorough or varied. So it is a good bibliography to show a range of sources: books, journals, films, etc. Not just websites or e-journals or e-books. Are pretty good. I'd say that's slightly different to websites, so there is a difference. And you can see here the thing that strikes you straight away are the authors. So we start off with the author. Adamson, Coetzee, Danielson, Fitzgerald, Greenblatt. There's nearly always an author, someone who's written, even someone who's put together the article on the website designer, whatever, the organization. There's someone at the lead. Okay. And then after that, we've got the date comes next in brackets. So if we look at Coetzee, because that's the easiest one. Coetzee, initials, year 2000. Disgrace in italics is the title of the piece. Okay, so this is a book by J.M. Coetzee. This is a nice, easy one called Disgrace. Where it was printed, where it was published and the publisher. So published in London by Vintage. So that's the most simple reference you can get on a bibliography. Book, date, author, date, book, where it was published, publisher, quite straightforward. Okay. We can look at none of these, I think, these are all books and stuff and articles, aren't they? Yeah. So we've got the page numbers, which is quite good. Yeah, so that's a classic book-based reference list, and yours are probably, they don't look like that much these days because so much comes from other places. So here's the simplest form of the reference, most used and recognized. So yeah, reference, we've got the author. We've got the author, we've got the date, we've got the title in italics, the publisher and place of publication. So that's the standard. If you get that in your head, I think most other sources you can sort of fit into it. Okay, be it whatever, a journal, a website, or whatever. The basic form It's then adjusted slightly for other types of source. So if you accessed and used information from Google's term of service on the 11th of May, it would look like this. And not, I don't know if you're going to do that. It's a bit boring, a bit dry, but it looks the same. So Google is the author, if you like, the company rather than the individual. We've got the date, 2020. We've got the title in italics, okay? So author, date, title, and then with a website, you put where it's available from, so the URL. So the full URL of the website, and then the date it's accessed, 11th of May, 2020. So it's still the same sort of format as a book, isn't it? You know, author, date, title of the thing, and instead of the place of publication, you've got the URL, and then you've got the date that's accessed. That's the difference with a website, okay? Yeah, so I accessed this photograph by Vanessa Winship from the Photo Bookstore website yesterday. Could appear, if I was to put it on a Harvard bibliography, if I was including this in an essay, you know, this image by Winship, I would then in the reference list put Winship, that's the author, the date, 2013, the title, Untitled from She Dances on Jackson, that's the title of the photograph, available at the URL, and the date I accessed it, 9th of October, 2024. Okay. So yeah, that's the way the Harvard system works. And it's you can get help with that. You can get systems where you just I haven't ever used it myself. I don't know how it works, but I think you just type in some of it and it picks up the rest maybe and just puts it in. Probably, you know, these days that's probably possible. Reference builders, bibliography builders, they are out there. There's quite a few of them. You can get that to help. The most important thing with this all the time is as you go along with your research, make a note of them. Otherwise you'll just forget. So some sort of system, yeah, where you make a note as you go along. And we're talking essay writing, and we're not talking about visual. I mean, some organizations like it with sketchbook work and stuff when you use people's images, but I think that's going much too far. I think we're just talking about academic essays as you get later on in this course and as you get later on in your academic journey. Brilliant. Okay, any final little questions or thoughts to put in the chat before we head off, or give you a couple of minutes to put something in there? Great photographer, by the way, Vanessa Winship. If any photographers out there, she's fantastic. Very poetic sort of documentary work. Okay, no more questions or any like that. Good. Well, we covered a lot today. Gosh, we did well. We did 20th century icons. We've done ideas generation and a bit on the Harvard. So we've had a lot of stuff. Beatrix, thank you very much. And thank you all for attending, and have a good couple of weeks. And I'll be back in a few weeks' time with quite a focused lecture, really. So look out for that one. Enjoy your next few weeks. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks, everyone.